All right, so today we're starting a new unit. It's kind of like our last unit, it just kind of goes in more depth. So we're going to be focusing a lot on linear functions and other types of functions. Linear functions are all straight lines. We talked about a specific kind of linear function called a proportion. And we kind of started to introduce what slope is. And now we're going to break down what slope is even more. So we are going to basically break down the equation of lines that exist that don't necessarily pass through the origin. And the way we're going to see those equations is in something called slope-intercept form. And the reason they call it slope-intercept form is because of the definitions of those two words. So in slope-intercept form, we can see the slope is the number in front of the x every single time. And the intercept, the y-intercept, is the thing that's being added to a number times x. So we can easily see the slope and the y-intercept of a graph. So the slope we talked about is the rate of change. A y-intercept is the point on a graph where it crosses the y-axis. So if I drew my line like this, my y-intercept would be that right there. We're going to use this to graph lines like the way we were doing with just slope, where we did rise over run. I let you start at any point. Now we'll have to start at a specific point. Before we get into the graphing, I just want you to get used to the basics of the equation. So we're going to go through each of these examples and we're going to find the slope and the y-intercept. The top part is pretty straightforward, and the bottom part, it gets a little bit more challenging. So if we look at the first example, our slope is the number in front of the x. So our slope is 3. Our y-intercept is the thing that is being added to that, which is 2. So that's how you tell what the slope is and what the y-intercept is. In the next slide or in the next video, we'll learn how to graph using this information. But right now, we're just focusing on those two things. This next one, the slope is the number in front of the x. In this case, it would be negative 1/3. The y-intercept is the number being added or subtracted. If it's a addition, that means it's a positive intercept. So this would be +5. We look at the next one, the slope is the number in front of the x, so 1/2. And the y-intercept is -1 because it's like a -1. The next one, the slope is the number in front of the x, so it's -2. And the y-intercept is -3. I know it's -3 because the original equation has a plus sign in it. I'm going to move to the next one. Our slope, this is one of the trickier ones. It just says y equals x minus 3. So you have to think about what the imaginary number is in front of all of our variables. And that number is 1. So our slope is 1. Our y-intercept is what's being added or subtracted. In this case, it's -3. This one, the number in front of the x is 2. So my slope is 2. But now we have to think about what our y-intercept is. We are adding something, but it's imaginary. Whenever you add 0 to an expression, it stays the same. So 2x is the same as 2x plus 0. So our y-intercept is 0. It's the origin. Just like we learned with proportional graphs, that line right there would pass through the origin, which means it has a y-intercept of 0. The next one, you guys are going to see this and you're going to want to say the slope is 6, but it's not really 6 because it's the number in front of the x. So our slope is actually 2. Our y-intercept is what's being added or subtracted, which is 6. Since there's no sign in front of the 6, the positive 6. This last one, our slope is the number in front of the x. It's the whole piece in front of the x. So it's actually -1/4. And our y-intercept, the point that it's going to cross on the y-axis, is 5. So some questions will be that simple, or you'll need to know the different pieces of them to really understand the questions. So I'm going to stop this video, and there'll be a separate video on how to graph these.